Honestly kind of took the GMAT on a whim. Never been a very good test taker, to be completely honest with you. Hi, Sydney here. Welcome aboard the Choo Choo Train. So ever since I posted some videos about taking the GMAT, best GMAT resources, and how I got a 710 on the GMAT in 2 weeks, I've been getting so many comments and questions from you guys. So today I decided to just go through a Q&A and really deep dive into the answers. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Quick disclaimer, a lot of people have been really excited, asking questions and saying that I've been motivating them to really study hard for the GMAT and also use my study guide strategy and day-by-day breakdown in order to get a good score. But there have been a few select people who are saying like they don't believe it, that it's impossible. The New York Sun is coming out. And I just wanted to say it was possible for me. And one thing I wanted to note is that from my experience, I wasn't working, I wasn't going to school at that time. I had a full 2 weeks dedicated to the GMAT without any other distractions or any other obligations. And I've also included testimonials of people who were able to achieve the same results in such a short period of time. Alright, so let's just get right into it and I'll start answering your guys' questions more in depth. So I'm gonna start off with my most recent video. One of the first questions that I got was about mock tests. I'm just gonna paraphrase most of these questions. So this first one is about how many mock tests that I took for the GMAT and were those mock tests from the Manhattan book or official guide, and also like which time intervals did I use for those mock tests. So to start off, I took all the mock tests from both of those comprehensive guides. Whenever I took them, I really tried to simulate the testing environment. So I would time myself, I would give myself the breaks that they allow you. I would make sure I'm using the fully allotted 3.5 hours, because this exam is not only about how accurately you can get these questions, but also about your stamina. How long can you sit in that room and still be able to focus and get those answers correct? Because if I did this exam in like 30-minute sprints, I'm sure I could get a much better score than I did if I sat down and pretended I was in the testing environment for 3.5 hours. I would also make sure that if you're doing 2 weeks, you are taking a mock test every 3 or 4 days, because you don't want to be caught in the situation where you're going through the actual exam and you're using more than the 2 minutes allotted per question. Additionally, I would make absolutely sure that you're taking the free CAT exams that are administered by the GMAT when you sign up for the GMAT exam, because these are actually the computer adaptive ones, which means that every time you get a question wrong, it gets easier. Every time you get a question right, it'll get more difficult. You need to make sure to be taking those, because chances are the same person taking the GMAT exam, they won't have the exact same questions in your order that you've gotten, if that makes any sense. I would also use them sparingly unless you are purchasing more free CAT exams, which I think might be a worthy investment depending on what your budget is and what you're thinking about in terms of studying for the GMAT. Some of these questions were asking about my personal experience. So one of them was saying, did you start from basics or did you have some knowledge of the concepts like the quant formulas and stuff? Besides taking the SAT for college admissions and just like taking general math classes, that was the extent of the knowledge that I had. I hadn't done any preparation beforehand. That's why for some topics such as critical reasoning, I had never seen that before, because I've never been tested on it in school. I've never been tested on it for any national exam. So I actually had to go and learn about it. So that took me a while to pick up. Long answer short is no, besides school and the SAT. Let's get into my most popular video, which is called How I Got 700 Plus on GMAT in 2 weeks of self-studying. There's quite a lot. I was not expecting so many responses. The first question is about timing, and this is extremely relevant. I found myself struggling with this a lot, especially with the quant section. For the quant section, you have approximately 2 minutes per question. So just making sure that you're like looking at the time whenever you're doing the question, you kind of get a sense of how long it's taking you. Also, I would ask yourself the following questions. How long am I taking per question on an average basis? Are there specific types of questions that are taking me longer than others, and why is that? I also recommended videos within the Veritas app, which are really helpful in like telling you the shortcuts and more efficient ways to get to the answer, because I feel like for the quant section, like if you had 10 minutes per question to figure it out, everyone can figure it out through trial and error, but they purposefully make it so that you need to be smart and have a strategy with approaching these. So I would suggest deferring to those. In summary, timing yourself, taking mock tests, figuring out why it's taking you longer on certain questions, and really going back and mastering that concept. I've been getting some individual questions. So someone was saying they wanted to take the GMAT after 3 years and when to start studying, to start preparing now, if the 2021 OG was good, and if there's a lot of difference between the official guides within 2 or 3 years. So in my personal opinion, you really shouldn't drag it out that long. But again, I have a personal bias where I took it in 2 weeks. With any single habit or skill, it takes a lot of consistent practice, and you have to keep honing those to not lose your progress. So stretching it out over 3 years is really way too long, and I think it will be a lot of time for less return than you could have had. Practicing on a regular basis, frequently and efficiently, was the best way to improve quickly. I wanted to be understanding of everyone's situation here, so this was my response. I said, personally, I would say 2 or 3 years of studying is way too long to prep for the GMAT, but then again, this is coming from someone who prepped in 2 weeks. It's also very hard to predict if there will be any material changes in the GMAT rules, the logistics, or exam questions, so I would err on the side of preparing in a much shorter time frame closer to the exam. I believe the average time people take to prepare is a couple months to maybe half a year or a year, give or take, depending on whether you're also working or going to school at the same time, in addition to GMAT studying. If you plan on applying for an MBA program within 5 years, which is currently how long your GMAT score is good for, then you can take it now or whenever you are able to finish studying and are ready to take the exam. So on that note, I also want to mention that GMAT studying is a very personal. It's really up to you how you want to cater to that. That's why in my GMAT video of how I got 700 plus in 2 weeks, I really talked about customizing your own study plan, and I talked about how you can do it yourself. Don't rely on the word of someone else, because they might be in a different situation than you are. They might be wanting to apply to an MBA program at a different time. So just really take it and think about your own schedule. You know, when you're practicing a sport or a skill, if you go for a while, even a couple days or like a week or so of not doing something, you kind of feel a little bit rusty. Let's compare this like lifting weights. So I used to lift weights very frequently, right, on a daily basis, and I saw improvement like that. I would take my rest days, but for the most part, I was very consistent. There was one time I missed 1 week at the gym, a single week, and I could not do the standard weight that I was able to do. I would say that this applies to many different things, not just sports, but also like skills, habits, and GMAT studying as well. I also got a lot of questions from people who were really panicking or freaking out about the exam. I would say having a very structured and organized plan and being able to shift your priorities on a day-to-day basis based on what you find out about your strengths and weaknesses is really key to this. The day before, I took the entire day off. Zero studying. I think I went to San Francisco to visit one of my friends. I didn't do anything. That really helped me with my nerves, and just having like a cheat sheet prepared at the end of every night and reviewing that before bed was also really helpful. I think it's kind of cool on a day-to-day basis where you learn a little bit more about yourself, like I'm really good at this, or I could work on this a little bit. Just being able to course correct and adjust as you find those out is pretty essential to being really efficient in studying in such a short amount of time. This next question was like a 3-in-1 question. So the first part of it, this person found the Quant GMAT section to be very easy, and if the level of the real GMAT exam was the same as the GMAT official guide question, is my preparation done when I do all the questions in the GMAT official bundle? First of all, congratulations that the GMAT Quant section is easy for you. That really cuts down on your studying. That was not the case in my experience when it came to Quant, so that is awesome. The level of the real GMAT will be similar to the official guide, because the official guide is written by the people who are administering the GMAT exam on the day of the test. At the same time, the official guide is not a CAT or a computer adaptive test. So rather than adjusting to you getting the answers right or wrong, the official guide is just a book. Like, you're gonna get the same questions regardless of whether you get the previous question right or wrong. I guess in summary, yes, it is similar, but not the same type of test. Is my preparation done when I do all the questions in the official guide? I honestly can't give you the answer to that because it is up to you. If you are scoring very high already and you're confident that you can replicate that on the exam, then it's your choice if your studying is done. If not, then I would just continue working more and just doing a little bit more studying. Did you complete all of the questions from all the resources that are mentioned? Which I usually put in my description. And I said, long story short, 2 weeks is definitely not enough time to go through every single one of the resources that I mentioned. I mainly focused on the official guide and the Manhattan prep book, and then use like the Power Score and other books as like supplementary studying. I only focused on the books that I thought were best and completely finished those cover to cover. Very confident about most of the questions in there. And then from the other books that I listed, I would borrow their practice exams or read those sections if I felt like the explanations in those like best resources that I used weren't enough for me to completely grasp it, or maybe they had a way of explaining that would make more sense to me. The resource that I did finish cover to cover were the following: Official Guide to the GMAT, Official Guide to the GMAT Quant, Official Guide to the GMAT Verbal, and almost all of the Manhattan prep books. Is it okay to use the 2019 edition of the official guide? Basically, is it okay if we use older versions? They're expected to put out a new book every single year, so unless there are many like drastic changes to anything on the exam, then I would say the older version is very much sufficient. Like when I took it, I don't think I used the newest version. I think I used the one from the year before and do a little bit of research, like Google whether there have been any significant changes or if people have talked about the differences between those two books. But they're releasing a new book every year. I can't imagine they would change too much of it, but I would say just try to get the newest one possible within your budget. If it's off by like a year or two, I wouldn't sweat it. The GMAT Club has all the questions and answers from the official guides, so you can always like cross-check that and do questions from the GMAT Club if for some reason they're not in your version of like an older book. Another question that I got was if it was possible to get a 700 plus self-studying with just the official guide and the Manhattan prep books. I don't want to give any cookie cutter answers because this really depends on the person. I don't want to have any limiting beliefs and say it's not possible. In my personal experience, those were the two books that I really focused on, and I feel like having some supplemental books on the side was helpful. Chances are, if you have the right books, if you put in the work, if you are able to be smart about efficiently studying, I definitely think it is possible. How much are you willing to put in? Do you have a strategy? Are you very focused in your studying? Are you prioritizing the right things? Are you giving yourself enough time before the exam? These are the main questions that should be asked. This doesn't come down to what resources you have. It comes down to you. Long-winded answer, but I would say yes, depending on your own study.